baby. Let it fly.
So Hoyt, my friend.
Yes, Steve.
Nice to hang out with you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So we're just chatting a little bit.
Yeah,
in
we
this
are.
Visit to LA, and
welcome to LA.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. So Hoyt, you were involved with the Eternal Values.
The Eternal Values. Yeah.
And who was the leader of that?
Frederick von Meers was the name he went by. His actual name was Freddie Myers.
That's not as sexy.
not as catchy either.
But, and you were involved from what year to what year?
I actually met him when I was 16, which would have been 78, 79, up in Nantucket, on the beaches there, very innocently. And then I actually moved in with the group when I was 21, right after I graduated from college.
And you were involved for 20 years?
Yeah, basically I lived with them for about another 15, and then I escaped. It took me about 3 attempts to finally succeed, but I did get away, and then I moved out here to California and went through kind of the post-traumatic stress disorder syndrome.
Yeah, but let's go back. So while you were you were one of the top male models in the world, correct?
Yeah, that's.
And you still look pretty damn good.
If you believe what you read, yeah, that's. It's.
No, but seriously.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky. I kind of piggybacked on the whole female supermodel thing. I was in the my class was. Cindy Crawford and Christy Turlington and Claudia
Did you
Schiffer.
kiss Cindy Crawford?
Yes, that's one of the hard things about my job.
That's tough.
And so they were always asking who's the first male supermodel, and somehow it kind of fell on my shoulders.
Okay, but you made tons of money and you gave it to the cult leader.
Well, that was the thing to do. Yeah, I mean, the end of the world was coming, and money didn't seem to matter too much in the sense other than what we were doing with it. And so I thought, and I was always being told by the cult leader that my generosity would always save me, which was a very
it's kind of like the more you give, the more you're going to receive back.
And I'll tell you, to some degree, that seemed to be the case. I mean, it seemed that the more I gave them, my career is skyrocketing. Of course, it just worked to their benefit, but that's kind of the way it happened.
Yeah, it's the old misattribution effect,
yes,
I think.
Exactly.
Actually, you were very talented, and you had good agents, and sold a lot of jeans or shirts or whatever else they were doing.
I did.
So give me 3 paragraphs of what did the Eternal Values believe?
It was Eastern based, so we studied the Hindu Vedanta, and but then we kind of researched all religions. So we looked at the Bible, we looked into some Buddhism, Islam, and that sort of thing. But mostly it was Hindu fundamentally, and but ultimately our little spin and twist on it all was. Freddie, the leader, was very into astrology, and so and basically his take on reincarnation moved further from just what did you do here on Earth? The idea was that you spend incarnations in other places in the universe in between earthly incarnations.
So truthfully, isn't this a UFO cult?
Yeah, it was ultimately all about. He was Freddie was written about in a book. Called Aliens Among Us by Ruth Montgomery, who was a big metaphysicist.
Aliens Among Us.
4
that's really credibility.
4 chapters, and that is what gave him credibility within that so-called community, and that's when our little kind of mom and pop operation started to become a more formal cult. We had tapes, we had books that we would recommend, and we created material for an audience, so to speak, and then we had a cable TV show and a radio show.
This was in New York City?
In New York City.
If I remember correctly?
Because cable TV in New York, as long as you paid for it, and I know that because I was writing most of the checks, as long as you paid for it, you could do whatever you wanted to do.
Right.
And so
weren't there a lot of very famous and wealthy people?
Well, we had some models, we had a couple of actors, and we definitely, there's like any cult, you target a certain kind of profile that will present a poster child.
Yeah, celebrities work.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of sucking people in, like Scientology.
Yeah.
Oops, I just mentioned it. Sorry, I promised I won't say that. And I seem to vaguely remember something about jewels.
Yes,
So
that was another twist on the
jewel scam.
Well, the idea was we all kind of wore these precious jewels, and the idea was using astrology that you were born with a certain kind of genetic kind of form that was deficient in certain energies, and the gems, if you wore them touching your skin, and if they were big enough, meaning expensive enough,
right,
then that would compensate that. So it's a kind of a...
Freddie sold you the gems.
How about that? Yeah, Freddie actually could get you a deal, though. Of which, one of the things when I finally did escape and leave and had this little pot full of rocks that I had paid, hundreds of thousands for, found out they were worth pennies on the dollar at best. And so that was another little kick in the behind of like, okay, yeah.
So you said you had tried to leave 3 times, and then you left.
I finally left, yeah.
And we were just talking before we said let's turn on the camera about what the point is that anybody could.
Yeah, I think my experience exactly. My experience in talking about because like any recovery process, there's definitely a confessional period of where I spent so much of my life, even in the public eye to some degree, because doing this career that I had, where it was very much a double life, because like some people had a sense that maybe I was involved in something, and I would sometimes get on a soapbox and talk about certain spiritual values and that sort of thing. But ultimately, number one, I didn't know I was in a cult, and no one else knew I was in a cult. They just knew something might be up at most. So there was a huge period during my recovery process where I felt like I just needed people to know that what you may be seeing is not all that is here. And so, I mean, it got to the point where I would get into a cab in New York City and say, yeah, I need to go to 42nd and 8th. And, oh yeah, did I tell you he's in a cult? Yeah. No, 20 years. No, really? Yeah. And because I felt this need to kind of say, like, listen, whatever you might think I am, this is really who I am. And start to own it and recognize that I had actually gained some valuable knowledge and some life experience that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
So the whole recovery process for me, which of course is ongoing, has been being able to, number one, forgive myself, which I was able to do through a massive amount of self-education and finding out that mind control and influence techniques work on everybody. All you have to show is some sort of receptivity to it. And if you're interested in what they're having to sell, you're kind of screwed. Now, from that point of view, I didn't have to beat myself up like, oh, what was wrong with me? Like, why did I fall for this? Because a lot of the indoctrination process and a lot of what we did in the group, where you'd have these kind of experiences where you'd be on the hot seat and have a firing squad of sometimes 10 or 20
break
people.
You down.
Absolutely. And you go into a virtual catatonic state. So you feel like, and at that point, as I learned when I actually went to Wellspring, was you move into your fight, flight, or fright sequence, in your brain. So you've left
freeze.
You've left the higher cortex of all your reasoning ability, your personality, and now you're just in like, what do I do? So the most simple questions appear difficult, and you start to question whether you're literally brainwashed. I mean, brain damaged. And that's where I started to think like maybe there's something wrong, because I couldn't even answer these very simple questions. And then after you finally get off the hot seat, this could go on sometimes for 2 to 10 to 12 hours sometimes at a time. But then you would finally get off it basically by saying, just tell me what to do, because I just want this to stop. And ultimately, it's kind of like you imagine you're volunteering to be told what to do. So
tell me what to believe.
Yeah,
I'll sign the confession.
Yeah, so you actually process it like, well, they didn't brainwash me. I asked them to tell me what to do. So that whole process is very difficult to figure out until you get the information. And then also, as I would get off the hot seat and the adrenaline would finally start draining from my brain, then I could start to go, well, wait, I could have said this. I could have said that. Actually, that question wasn't hard at all. And then I just thought, well, I'm just kind of stupid, obviously. And what they're telling me is that I'm kind of stupid, and I am probably kind of brain damaged, and that I'm pretty hopeless.
And you also had told me in another conversation that every time you exerted some self-interest or some self-concern, you were selfish.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
It was all turned around.
Any of your personal hopes, dreams, and ambitions, that was selfish. It was all about the cause. And with some near apocalyptic future coming, why would you want to pursue anything on your personal nature?
And what did you believe Freddie was?
Well, it's interesting. It evolved. Initially, the whole kind of recipe we were being sold, so to speak, was that he was the great teacher, and he was kind of procuring and going to train this kid who was going to become like a self-realized, almost like a little Jesus type guy. Like not me, no, but I was going to be best friends with him, type of thing, and so it was kind of like he was going to be the teacher of the next kind of avatar, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And then when that relationship actually ended up breaking down, because this kid, who was like a wonder kid and a very great talker and kind of a bright kid, ultimately started after a few years thinking, wait a second, I could probably do this myself. I want to set up my own shop. And then this became a conflict, and then he got kicked out of the group. And now things kind of spiraled out of control. And then not too long after that, he actually died, because that kid went and ended up going to Vanity Fair and exposing this whole article that came out, which was like my parents' worst nightmare of all the worst things they ever thought I could be involved in. They're all there in black and white. Now, some of it was sensationalized, but ultimately it was basically on the line.
I remember reading it.
Yeah,
What year
juicy
was that?
stuff. That was 1990.
Is it still available? I'd love to reread it.
I have it, of course, but I can certainly send it to you. But yeah,
I'd love to reread it now that we're getting to be friends and calling me in. So listen, what would you like to most say as we're wrapping up?
Well, I think what I was saying before we even turned on the camera, I said I think what's most important to me at this stage is helping, to shift the awareness out there as far as what people understand about cults and what type of people get involved in cults, because it's been my experience in telling my story, the most common reaction is there's a lot of preconceptions and
false preconceptions.
Well, exactly, and and those preconceptions are not ones that I fit into. So when I start telling this story, people are like, whoa, wait a second, because first initially there's a defense mechanism involved where a lot of people want to state up front very quickly. Well, that wouldn't happen to me because of this reason, this or that.
I would never get pneumonies.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course when I can go through and tell them, well, actually there are groups that would actually cater to all those things you're saying, and that would actually not be the case. Mm-hmm. But once I can at least get them to the point of where they'll give me 5 minutes, at least tell a little bit about my story, then I start seeing a little short-circuiting going on of going, wait a second, this is not at all what I had in my mind. Because people don't realize they have a false preconception. They don't even realize they have a preconception. Because most people haven't met a cult member who's talking about it the way I am, of saying, yeah, I got through this and this is fine, and I'm actually proud of myself, and I actually don't run away from it. I actually wear it as a badge of honor of showing showing a little, my human resiliency of spirit, that you can actually go into situations you thought you could never handle and survive them and come out of them with actually some valuable life lessons. So as terrible as it was in many ways, it actually is something I'm very proud of.
And we actually value our freedom in a way that most people have no comprehension.
It's true. And as I was saying earlier, you develop a certain level of compassion and empathy you wouldn't have otherwise. Definitely. Because you really get to experience human behavior and the underbelly of it, of how dark things can get when people under a cause have basically given up their will to kind of trust their own critical thinking, trust that spirit inside them. And the beauty of the whole story is that spirit, no matter how much it gets punched down and driven, what you feel is out of you will never die. Yeah. And that there's always a part of you, that little authentic part that will find some way to kind of come back and fight. And that's something that I think is really important to realize, and that this experience is something that you can really almost, as in my opinion, take on as something that was a gift. Mm-hmm. And it's not a university I would recommend others to go to, but I'm grateful for it, because if this is the lens I now hold, and all of that was how I had to get here, then it was worth it. Mm-hmm. And I think as long as people still think it can't happen to them, which I was that guy. Me too. I was telling you earlier that
those Scientologists are cults, the Christians
everything
are
else is a cult. And the mere
God.
fact that I'm in my group means it can't be a cult, because I would never join a cult. Mm-hmm. So when you start to realize that is the problem, that it can't happen to me, and that only gets erased by people finding out more about it.
Right, so I talked to you about one of my fantasies is to do like a celebrity project to get celebrities who are in cults to start speaking out and say, you know what, it happened to me, and to make it cool to speak out about, you know what, it could happen to anybody, and then we can destigmatize the whole thing and educate the planet. So
it's exactly right.
You're my first celebrity.
I don't know if I measure up.
So can I talk about dumbbells, or you're not ready yet?
You can talk about
dumbbells. So you've
Yeah.
written and produced and starred in a movie called Dumbbells,
right?
And it's going to come out in a bunch of months.
Right. Hopefully spring break.
It's
2013.
in the character someone who had been in a cult.
Yes, it's semi-autobiographical. My writing partner and I discovered during our writing process that the more that we injected our own kind of wounds and kind of demons that had kind of faced in our lives, the more exciting the script became. And ultimately it became something that made it feel original. And so what started out as a line or two of mentioning the fact that my character had been in a cult actually became a whole subplot for the second half of the movie. So
cool.
I
hope 1 billion people watch it.
Well, we'll see what happens.
And you keep speaking out.
I'm not going away.
And what can I say? You're the man.
Thank you, Steve.
I wish you
I want everyone to know, when I went through my dark times, the first book I read, and the book that opened my eyes and allowed me to actually accept the fact that I've been in the book was yours. And I will always
my first one, Combating Cult Mind Control.
Cult
I
Mind
didn't
Control.
pay him to say that, by the way.
It was remarkable, and I'll be forever grateful for that. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
All right, man.
Thank you. Later.